Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We're really excited to have you here. We will give folks a couple of minutes to dial in, and I'm really, really excited to have you here today. We have an incredible guest speaker and creator who's going to be generously giving all of us his expertise and insight into the live streaming world. And we're also going to start from the basics. I wanted to thank everyone who RSVP'd on Eventbrite and filled out the section that said, what are you hoping to learn today? We got a lot of great context on where people are, what they're hoping to gain from this webinar, and we're going to try to hit on as many points as possible. You'll see that the live chat on YouTube is enabled. Please feel free to use it to ask each other questions. There's a ton of other event creators dialed in here today who've been live streaming and might have answers. So feel free to use the chat. We will try to keep up with it and grab some of the questions for the Q&A at the end. And we also have a ton of questions that you submitted in advance. So we'll cover as much ground as possible. And while we're waiting, we're going to give folks a minute or two to dial in. Feel free to pop off with what city or country you're dialing in from. I saw that we had RSVPs from event creators around the world, which is always so exciting. And we'd love to know where you're from. All right, we're hitting around the 2:02 mark, so hopefully folks have been able to dial in. And if not, we will jump in and send folks the recording later. But to kick things off, I wanted to introduce myself. I am Vivian Chavez. I am the community manager at Eventbrite, and I'm also the in-house virtual event expert. Outside of Eventbrite, I create my own events and do a lot of live streaming. So it's both a profession and a passion for me. And I'm so excited today to share things that we've learned as a company as we've seen the entire event industry move online during the course of this pandemic, and also tap this incredible expert that we have today who's got so much knowledge, it's nuts. So I'm thrilled to have our guest on today. We have Gilad Gershoni, the founder of Elevated Stream. He is a absolute OG in the streaming world. He not only runs his own full service live streaming agency, he was the longtime sound man of this little Grammy winning hip hop group, De La Soul. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're amazing. And he also was one of the early innovators in the live streaming space, helping companies like Twitter, Apple, Google, Bonnaroo, Coachella, and Outside Lands get their events online and live streamed. So we are thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and welcome, everybody.
Do you want to give, I know I gave the sort of high level of what you've done. Do you want to give like a 30-second elevator pitch to give some of the other event creators here some background and why you started Elevated Stream and your experience in the virtual world?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Elevated Stream really started many, many years ago as I was a creator and am a creator today. When I found out about live streaming was during my time touring around the world, and quickly realized that it was a great way to tap into different viewerships or audiences that were unable to attend. And that really started my passion for live streaming. Today, we help all kinds of creators, folks just starting to brands like you heard before. And we really just try to find solutions outside the box. Thinking is our main focus. And more importantly, being able to get you and your events to a successful event, right? So please, join us in this conversation. Looking forward to sharing all the information that we have lined up for you today. Additionally, I've been doing this for a long time. There may be terms that I'd be using. Please, there's no stupid question, right? So please ask the question if you don't know in the chat room. Probably others may have that question as well, but I will try to keep my industry knowledge or terminology, if you will, to the subjects at hand here. So thank you again for having me.
I'll keep you honest because, we're so excited. And I'll keep you honest. I think a lot of us learned on the fast track during the pandemic last year how to get online. So I'm, a little bit of a newbie myself. And if you get too fancy, we're going to bring you back down to the rest of us.
Please keep me honest. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. That's my full-time job. So to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today, I thank you again if you're dialing in now. I mentioned early that we're so happy that a lot of you took time to fill out the what you're hoping to learn, and we're going to try to cover a ton of ground. But the very first thing we'll start with is just getting your event online. Some of you are live stream pros and you're here to find out about upgrades. Other people are saying that, okay, I want to take my event online for the very first time ever. And we have some great tips and tricks for everyone across the board. We're going to talk about some of the basics of just the actual live streaming technology, and then dive into some pro tips for folks who are looking for ways to elevate and improve what they're already doing. We're going to go over some common mistakes. There's a lot of options out there, and there's a lot of ways to kind of trip over yourself. And so Gilad has seen it all, and he's going to give us a little bit of insight into some of the tips he has for people to avoid these mistakes. And then finally, we're going to get to some Q&A. We have a lot of pre-submitted questions, and we'll try to keep up with some of the stuff happening in the chat. I can see a lot of people are already chiming in and saying hi. We're so happy to have you, and we will do our very best to cover a ton of ground. But I will also be sending a follow-up email after this webinar that will link to some resources that we talk about during the talk today. All right, without further ado, I'm going to dive in. So the very first question, and I saw this actually a lot in the forum, are people saying, should I even host my event online? Is it too late? Did I miss the virtual window? Is my event good enough? I'm really not tech savvy. Should I do it? And I want to reassure you that the resounding answer is 100% yes. We commissioned a study last year in the middle of the pandemic, and we heard loud and clear from our consumers that not only are they hungry for the connection that they're missing from in-person events, they're really excited about some of the increased accessibility, the global audience, the fact that they can tune in with their friends from afar into virtual events. And in fact, 57% of the respondents said that they will happily continue attending virtual events even after shelter-in-place restrictions are lifted, which means that even if you're getting started now and in-person events come back hopefully soon, no one really knows right now, people are still going to be using virtual events. And I think it's a great way to start to unlock broadening your audiences and adding some new revenue streams to your business. So we'll touch some more on a little bit of these details, including, pricing and how to get people online. But it is a great addition, and you should do it. And if I click here, we are going to start from ground zero. Now that we're all in agreement that taking your events online makes sense, I'm here to give you another piece of good news and to tell you that you are totally capable of doing this. Even if you feel like you're tech savvy, if you're intimidated by the live streaming world and a little overwhelmed by all the choices, we're going to start from the very, very basics. And then for those of you who are pros, hang tight. We're going to get to some fancy stuff too. So when I say the basics, I mean the basics. Like Gilad said, no question is a stupid question. And so for anyone who maybe your job said, okay, figure out how to get our event online, and you're having a little bit of a panic moment because you're like, I don't even really know what live streaming means, we'll boil it down for you. You already are an event creator. You either have a skill, a specialty, a class, a workshop, a business that has something to offer your communities and your attendees, and you just have to figure out a way to put that online and then find your audience so that they can tune in. It's really as simple as that. Many of you are already creating events, and you were doing so before the pandemic. Maybe you figured out a way to do it in a socially distanced way, and we're here today to support you in that little connecting line and figuring out the tech. And I think that one of the most reassuring things here, and one of the first things that Gilad and I talked about when we were figuring out, how do we support the event creators and get them online? We want people to know that you don't have to have a fancy setup. You can have anything as simple as a computer. And Gilad, I know that you're at home with like 7,000 mixers and screens and monitors and microphones, but from your perspective, you mentioned that it really doesn't have to be fancy. Can you talk about like the bare minimum that a person needs to get their event online?
Absolutely. Today, most of us have all we need in our pockets, our phones. They come with a camera, they come with an internet connection, they come with a microphone. So you really just pull that out wherever you are. If you find an event that you want to share, or some special thing that your followers or your audience would appreciate, right? And sometimes it could just be a thought that you want to share with your audience. And so that's a really easy way to go. Oftentimes we have computers for work or for personal use, and some are better than others, right, for this type of thing. But looking around, you can find many things that may be in a drawer, right, or in a box somewhere that you can pull out an old VHS cam. Maybe dating myself there, but you know what I'm saying, like a handheld video camera or DSLR that you may have used and don't use anymore, right? Because we all come so accustomed to our phones. So those are some of the basics. Is really, you need an internet connection, you need a video camera or some kind of way to capture your video, and an audio source, which is your voice, and to capture that so that your audience can experience what you have to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to kind of ground people, I think a lot of us have been doing meetings online via Zoom and other sort of more meeting oriented software. And you can take that and turn it into an opportunity to connect with your attendees. Obviously, and we're going to get into this, there's a ton of ways to start to elevate that and take it onto more public streaming platforms. But if you've dialed into a Zoom call for work, you can bring your event online in a live streaming capacity. And we're not going to focus too much on the Eventbrite product today, but I know that a ton of people on the call are already using Eventbrite. So on the theme of using what you have, I'll really quickly touch on some of the ways that Eventbrite can support you in getting your events online. And let's see here. Okay, great. So one of the things that we offer is some really great partnerships and deep integrations with some existing streaming softwares, including Vimeo and Zoom. I know that some of you are already using that technology and it's been going well. And then one of the other things I want to highlight is that you can definitely just make a meeting, make a YouTube live, make a Instagram live, and connect with your attendees. But one of the benefits of using a system like Eventbrite is it allows you to have an organized way to promote your event, collect attendee information, and have some really streamlined ways for people to dial in. One of the things people are navigating right now is there's so much activity online. There's Netflix, there's TikTok, there's a ton of online events. And so if you just throw a link out into the ether, it can be a little bit harder to grow, build, and retain your audience. And using a system like Eventbrite is going to give you some increased ways to do that. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, people are willing to pay for events. You don't necessarily have to put your event online for free. That is a great business option, and it's a great way to grab a lot of audience and have a really broad group of people dialing in. But you are providing something valuable. In the survey that we showed earlier, and I saw one of the YouTube questions, that was actually an in-house survey that we conducted of respondents who are in the Eventbrite ecosystem. We found that people are willing to pay for events. If you're providing an event of value, you should actually feel like you're able to charge for it. And a system like Eventbrite will allow you to add that revenue stream on to your live streaming experience. We integrate really deeply with a couple of platforms, including Zoom. And I just wanted to give a little shout out here. I know a lot of you are using the current Zoom integration. I'm super excited to say that the product team has been working on a ton of improvements on that front. So keep an eye out for some product emails because we'll be announcing some really cool improvements soon. And if you haven't used it yet, check it out. You can poke around. But when you're creating an Eventbrite event, it'll ask you to select a location, and one of the options is online. After you click that, you'll see this option here that gives you a slew of platforms you can connect to, including just a general webinar and live stream link. Gilad, do you want to chime in here? I know we have some of the pretty user-friendly options. We're currently on YouTube Live, so that was the option that I clicked when I set up this Eventbrite event. But there's a million other streaming platforms. What else are you seeing that's really popular in this space right now?
Great question. I'm seeing a lot of creators go to specific destinations for their audience, right? Like musicians have been flocking, and e-gamers or esports has been for a long time over at Twitch, and musicians have been flocking over there. Twitter as well is a great destination for announcements, conferences, events, product launches, you name it. And it's often overlooked by way of a destination for live streaming that has a lot of success. So those two are definitely ones that I've been seeing a lot of focus, right? But there's many others that are out there that you can have more kind of private. in the sense of, like a Vimeo, right? Other types of solutions like that, or other, like a Skype, for example, right? That is
Yeah.
also commonly used for many years. Yeah.
And I think one of the guiding principles here is as you get streaming sort of in your wheelhouse and it's a skill you feel comfortable with, you can start to explore platforms. Don't limit yourself to the first one that you try. Check out a few others, dial in as an attendee on certain platforms, see what you like and what you don't like. And it really all depends on your event, where your audience is, and what you're trying to achieve. If you want a big, giant event with a lot of people
Right.
who can tune in, using something like YouTube or Vimeo or Twitch might be great. But if you want something that's a little bit more private, controlled, password protected, that's when you want to look into things like Zoom. So we actually have a great blog post, if we'll put it in the follow-up email, that gives you a little bit of guidelines and some case examples of what platform you might choose and why. So there's a lot out there. That's like a whole nother topic. We can talk about specific platforms, but we want to make sure that, choosing the platform is one part of this, and then getting online is another big part of it. An often overlooked part of live streaming is this, which I think, Galad, every time we chat, you mention this because it's so important. And to kind of give a peek behind the curtain to everyone who's dialing in today, Galad and I had 2 dress rehearsals to make sure that we had all of our tech in order and things figured out. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of testing and how people can go about adding this into their live event flow?
Absolutely. Once you have come up with the equipment that you're going to use, you oftentimes, I recommend that you test all the time. You test the things like your camera and your microphone, that they're working, your internet connection, that is what you're expecting it to. Now during COVID times, everybody's working from home and internet fluctuates. So, keep that in mind, that internet is really your source of getting out to the world from wherever you are. And if that fluctuates or all of a sudden drops, it's going to really impede your ability to go live. So testing that, not just once. And when I mean testing it, you can do a couple of different tests. There's a speed test that allows you to understand what is available to you by your provider, both what you can watch and also what you can send out or transmit, as we like to say. And that gives you a sense of what kind of quality you can send to one of these destinations, right? YouTube, Vimeo, Zoom. And that really gets overlooked, because oftentimes what people do is they test their internet connection. They know they have a solid connection the first time, and then never think about it again. And if you're in an event space that other attendees are showing up, or it's a different time of day from when you tested originally, things can ultimately change, right? I've had an experience where, we were out in the wild. When we were testing in a field for an event, there was plenty of internet connection. And then when everybody attended, that changed drastically. So having, that kind of forethought, or at least a checkbox to know that you're always checking your internet connectivity. And that goes along with, if you're bringing a host or a guest, you want to know what their internet connection is as well, right? And that goes for, when we were testing here, we tested the internet on our first rehearsal, right? And then we tested it again right before going live, just to confirm that that is what, we tested is also available now. And the same goes for video and audio, right? If you're using a Bluetooth connection, if you're using a camera that has been disconnected since the rehearsal, you oftentimes want to try and run through the entire flow of equipment. Additionally, making sure that things like YouTube or Zoom is seeing your signal, right? So making sure that it was showing up as you expect during rehearsal, but also prior to the event is, very, very important, that everything is working, your audio, there's sync between the video, and, you're confident. It reduces the stress level if you test over and over, because you are building a confidence model and a reassurance of what you can expect during the event, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
love that point. And
did
I
I? Yeah,
think, one thing I would tack onto that is that, as an event creator, you want to enjoy the experience. And so if you are setting
absolutely.
yourself up for sort of a hectic on-site thing and you're not really able to focus on the content that you're delivering and connecting with your audience, it's just not going to be as fun. And so I think that testing ahead of time, previewing the stream, checking in on the platform and all the links that you're using is going to make your life better. And I know we're getting a couple of great questions in the YouTube about like, what are we using to stream right now and any equipments? And I just want people to know we're going to get to that. We have a couple of slides here. We're going to talk about upgrades and equipment. So don't worry. And another really quick thing that I will say is lighting and background. So a lot of people
Absolutely.
will overlook this element, and dialing in and all of a sudden realizing that you're completely backlit and you look like an anonymous interviewer on a news show, and you have to like spend some time adjusting your camera. Get online if it's just you and you're streaming live to your audience without a bunch of bells and whistles, and just make sure that things are set up in the way that you like and the lighting is, doing you favors, and that you're happy with that. Any other things on
Right.
testing before
Right.
we dive into some of these upgrading options that people are so excited about?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much that could be said about testing, right? Links that you're sharing, especially if you're having an event, sharing the link, the correct link, and making sure that it works is something that should be tested. Same with the fact, if you're using a new platform like YouTube or instead of Zoom or vice versa, right? Now you're switching to Zoom to take care to use all their wonderful features. You want to make sure that you run through it. Maybe you have a friend that can watch, or you record yourself and make sure that it's working as you expect, right? And lastly, I would say, don't overthink it. You can definitely just go live casually and try
Yep.
something out, even if it's on a test
Yeah.
account or a personal account, right? Um, there's a lot to consider, but oftentimes people get bogged down by that, right? So I definitely
Yeah.
encourage folks to just try it, right? And that's the quickest way to understand kind of the nuances.
Yeah, you have to get live. And I think, going back to the slide that we had a second ago, start simply and use what you have, test and feel good about
Absolutely.
it. And that's when you start to add some layers in. So you don't have to incorporate everything that we're sharing today into your very first live stream. It can be something that you build on in layers. But with that, I think that there are some really great, and some of them are easy, some of them take either more time, more money, or more skill, but there are options to upgrade. So when you think about someone getting really comfortable with the basic live stream, I'm using my laptop mic and laptop camera, I've got Zoom on lockdown, I'm communicating with my attendees, I feel good about my content, and now I'm ready to take it to the next level. What are some low-hanging fruits for people to really up the professionalism?
Absolutely. I'm glad you're asking this because I get this often. You know, uh, One easy thing, I mean, we talked about the internet connection before. Oftentimes people say, I'm on Wi-Fi, that's going to be fine, right? You can upgrade the internet connection that you have, going direct with an Ethernet connection. If for an event that's important to you, that's a guaranteed upgrade. It's going to give you many benefits that you wouldn't expect, right? I mean, Wi-Fi is spotty, it's cordless, it's even with the best Ethernet, with the routers and service providers, things can go awry, right? And so to
I'm gonna
minimize that, and yeah, please jump in.
Yeah, I wanna jump in there because I'm also seeing a lot of people ask questions. And to tell you about how the sausage was made before this call, my Wi-Fi was a little bit spotty, and I didn't have a great option to connect to Ethernet. So pretend I am, your aunt or your mother that doesn't know a lot about technology, and you have to explain to me like, how do I know if my bandwidth is good? How do I improve my connection to make sure that my live stream doesn't, get fuzzy or shut down?
Yeah, great question. So oftentimes, we can quickly jump into a Zoom call or to let's just use Zoom for example, right? And we can see there whether our video feed is as crisp as you'd want, right? if you're using a camera from your computer, there are some settings that you can adjust to ensure that your camera quality is ideal. But from an internet perspective, what we really want to shoot for in the test that I mentioned earlier, you can go to many different sites. One that I like is speedtest.net. You can run a little quick test there. It'll give you the upload and download speed that you have available. And what we're looking for is typically 5 megs up, 10 megs up is best, and higher. But essentially, you have 5 megabytes available to your upload speed. That is a great indication that you can stream at higher quality, right? It doesn't limit you from going live. Just know that if you have less than that, the quality may be restricted, right? And that's not a problem, right? Just knowing that that's what you can expect is good to know. And that's some of the things you can find out from testing. Additionally, you can jump onto a call with a friend and ask their opinion, right? You can see just kind of what is that experience right away. And oftentimes you may already know, right, from your experiences on Zoom calls or work-related conference calls, right? So that's
that makes a ton of sense.
To identify it.
Yeah, goes back to our testing thing. Get on a practice call with your friends so you know, like, you might not have the crispest video and the sharpest internet, but if that's okay, especially as you're starting out, go for it, test with a friend, make sure it's just the quality that you're okay with, and then you can look into upgrading. There's some great comments in the YouTube chat, so thank you so much for people chiming in with how you've handled this. Some folks are mentioning that when they have webinars, they ask their speakers to upgrade their Wi-Fi speeds, and then they can revert back afterwards. So there's some really great information in there. If you're not tuned into the comments, I would check it out. Let's talk about equipment for any of our gearhead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. I mean, some of these software or destinations, they do have settings that that are defaulted to lower quality sometimes, right? Depending on your plan or depending on the application you have. So the connection you have or the end result may also be adjusted there, right? And oftentimes, people think about 1080 or 4K or these kind of big, numbers that they see on their TV when they buy it or they hear, industry talking about it. And I guess the reason why I'm bringing it up is that it's not always necessary to go at the highest quality, right? It's ideal for sure, but if you're balancing, or it's really a balancing act between the internet connection, the equipment you have, the destination, right? The overall experience. And so there is a way to balance all these things, these different pillars, if you will, to maximize what you have, right? And I think that that's really what we are focusing on here in some of the articles we wrote, right? And is how to start thinking about these elements and balancing them to achieve success, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Jumping into some of the equipment.
Yeah, totally. I was going to do a really quick, I'm going to plug a couple. So I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube comments and feeding them to Gilad. So for folks asking, it was speedtest.net is the website. But if you just Google speed test, like Gilad mentioned, there's a few other options there. And pulling in from a question that came up earlier that'll kick us over to the gear side of things. Someone said, do you have to have an external camera or can you just use your laptop camera? And I wanted to give people another little peek behind the curtain. Gilad is actually on an external camera and I'm just using my in-house computer camera with just some nice lights around me to sort of boost the quality that it is. But do you want to talk a little bit more about
of course,
some of the gear recommendations you have?
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple different aspects that we look at, right? The audio, the microphone, the camera, the computer, or the type of equipment that you're using to put it all together and send it out to the internet, right? Additionally, there's light, there's different types of mics and different types of cameras, right? So depending on your budget, depending on your goal and what you already have would determine where you may want to consider upgrading or choosing of different equipment. From a microphone, oftentimes upgrading just your audio, for example, here Viv is using a Yeti microphone, and I'm using a Bluetooth Apple AirPods, I believe they're called. You probably can hear the difference, right? I'm choosing to use this for convenience because it's allowing me to be free. I don't really have a desk in front of me to put a microphone on, and that's just a personal choice, right? For Viv, she has the Yeti. It sounds, I personally think, better than my voice, and probably something I should consider purchasing or at least having, right? I have a ton of different mics, and again, for convenience, I chose this. But again, you can start to see how, a microphone that is USB that plugs right into the computer can make a big difference, and it's not that expensive, right? It can be whether it's a Yeti or something other that's comparable. You can find these types of things around $100 in most cases, and obviously they go up much more expensive. But that's the first thing I typically recommend to upgrade is your audio, right? And based on what your nuances or your preferences are, will determine which way you go, right? And that's convenience, budget, and quality. Additionally, I would say the computer is often another upgrade, right? We can always increase the type of computer it is. Maybe it's more modern. Maybe we increase the RAM. Maybe we increase the graphics card. These are different parts of the computer that can be more robust for the different types of events or use cases. The computers we use for our work typically are not the ideal for a video and audio kind of broadcast solution. So looking at upgrading that is always a smart thing to do. Again, if your budget allows, right? There's other equipment outside of a camera that can be instead of a computer that can be supplemented. There's little encoders. Encoders are boxes that essentially, encoders can be software or hardware, and hardware would be a standalone device, kind of like a computer, that can take your video and audio feed and send it out into the internet, right? Whether Wi-Fi or hardline. And so that may be something enough for what you're looking to do. So it really depends on the use case. One more thing I would add, I'm sure there's questions in the YouTube, and I should probably pull it up to look at it as well.
No, don't. One of us doing it is great.
Okay, great. Thank you. But oftentimes a light, right? Adding a light, like a ring light or a couple, I think I have some around here somewhere. But here they are. Essentially, these are little lights that you can get for $50, $100, make a big difference. And one cool thing about lighting is that it helps your computer with processing and increases the quality, right? It's kind of a little gem that you can take away, and adding that light would simplify the computer's efforts, right? The power that it needs to make the video quality even better, right? The more lights, the more the computer and the camera can take in the video that you're sending, or the subject matter, right?
Yeah, I love that.
And
I think
but I will pause there.
Well, and that's kind of what I was going to say, is that once you start talking about like external hardware and some of these additional things, that's when you go over my head. So I feel very comfortable going online. I have some equipment over the course of the pandemic. I got a ring light, I got a Yeti microphone, and I figured out the things that make the stream feel clearer, but don't give me a lot of anxiety in terms of managing tech and equipment that is frankly like, just a little intimidating to me. And so I think that feeds in perfectly to our next slide, which is for those of you who are already at this point and you're like, okay, I have this equipment and now I'm trying to figure out how to do the really super fancy stuff. I've dialed into a couple of live events and the graphics that they're showing and all of these cool things are really exciting, but I personally don't know how to do that. And nor do I have the time, because it takes time and skill to learn some of these really advanced live streaming technologies. And so not so subtle plug to say that you don't have to do this alone. There are groups out there, there are companies and people that can help you elevate your live stream. I'm trying to click to the next slide. And it's giving me a little bit of sass here. But you can go to companies like Elevated Stream and they can support your live stream and getting you online. So you really don't have to do it by yourself. Galad, do you want
That's
to talk a
right.
little about some of
That's
the
right.
things that Elevated Stream does?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Elevated Stream, as I mentioned earlier, was created from, you know, my own passion and really starting up with live streaming when there wasn't a lot of equipment or anybody really uh, offering solutions, right? So I had to come up with ideas and really outside of the box thinking to um, make the events feel like you were there or as close to as possible. And today we have a lot of more options, right? Um, that said, it's a lot more things to consider. And one often question we get from people that are starting is, well, what should we do, right? And you may be asking yourself now that too, right? Is how do I add a lower third, which is a graphic with a name you may see on a newscast or other moving graphics, and we help really identify and work with our clients and our partners to establish what is the goal and really figure out how do we simplify or meet the um, event success, right? It doesn't always have to be a big production, although that also works, right? Conferences have a lot of different booths, a lot of different attendees, different speakers moving around, but oftentimes that's not an everyday thing, right? Like today, we have just Viv and I having a simple conversation with some graphics behind. Uh, we could have really had a whole panel, but we decided that this was an intimate setting and one that we wanted to really hone in on um, these specific questions that you're all here to learn about. And that's what Elevated
And to
Stream does,
kind
right?
of
We help identify and furthermore, we help produce, right? So it's a matter. Every event is different, right? And so we try to achieve success for all our creators and all our companies that we work with.
Yeah, and so you not only have these kits, but you also support people in just consulting and telling them what softwares to use, and maybe to give people
Right.
another peek behind the curtain, since I think, we're doing a webinar on live streaming and we are live streaming it. So it's great to kind of talk to anchor it in this example. Do you want to talk a little bit about the flow that we used in terms of tech? I'll chime in from the very beginning, which is we obviously used Eventbrite for ticketing and promotion, and I used the online event option and I connected to YouTube Live. So that's what that part looked like. But then we had to go from how do we get Galad and I talking onto this YouTube Live platform? And that's kind of where you came in with your expertise and figured out the best option for our webinar.
That's right. Yeah. So I can't do it all by myself. I have a team that is in the studio, and they are the brains behind the operation as we are on screen. And so what we're able to do is have Vivian and I call in to the studio, and the studio has a whole bunch of different sources. Some of the sources are the video signals we have. Other sources are the slideshow, right, and the moving graphics. And we have coordinated what is called the run of show, essentially what each point is going to be talking about. What are those cues for changing the slides and the positioning of the video, whether it's full screen or now in the bottom of the screen. And so all that is taken into consideration through tools and mixers and both video mixers, audio mixers, and switching software, right? That allows us to put it all together and present an event in a webinar like this, right?
Yeah. And there
There's
are,
there's many
some
tools
really
like that.
accessible options. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
So
please.
I know some
Yeah,
people have mentioned OBS in the stream. Restream is
right.
something that we were thinking about as an option.
That's right.
What else is out there that people can use?
Yeah. So The OBS is a great solution. It's free. It's always being updated with many different plugins and functionality. It's a great place to start and very robust. You can easily deep dive into that and learn a lot from it with minimal cost. Restream, you mentioned, is another great opportunity in software. They have a studio where you can have 10 callers, I believe, join your screen, and they offer you some lower thirds, some graphics on screen, right? Having somebody's name, having a video play out, having full screen graphics that overlay, and they have a couple different ways of moving and switching the scenes or elements. Same with StreamYard is another one that I've heard people use quite a bit, right? That is a great tool, similar to Restream. Restream, I will note, they allow you to go to multiple destinations at once, right? So you can choose Zoom, or you can choose LinkedIn, or you can choose YouTube, right? You can choose multiple outlets or destinations that offer you to kind of hit a wider group of viewers, right? So those are a few, but there's many, and depending on your budget,
so
yeah, exactly, and we're seeing more and more pop up every day. And another one that's been around for a long time, Wirecast. You may have some enjoyment in their UI and simplicity, but they offer a lot of very robust tools as well. So I can go on. I mean, there's many different solutions out there. Hopefully you find the one that's right for you, and happy to talk to anybody that is looking for the right solution.
Yeah, and we will definitely send out information on how you can connect with Elevated Stream, and just know that there are lots of options out there to get support, that you don't have to figure this out on your own, and that if you can't figure out all this tech, please don't feel alone or like you're totally inept. It's really complicated, and there's a ton of stuff out there. So a lot of us are talking to each other and leaning on experts to get support to really elevate the professionalism of streams. And with that being said, I want to be cognizant of time, because we have gotten so many great questions that I want to get through these common mistakes, because I think there's some really juicy tidbits that echoes a little bit of what we've said already, but also starts to introduce some reminders and some new information. So we're going to talk about common mistakes. As I mentioned, Gilad is a streaming expert. He's been around for ages doing this work, and he's seen it all. And so he and I worked together to come up with some of the most common mistakes, and that we see it as well on the Eventbrite side. And the very first one, to kind of echo what we were just talking about, is the first common mistake is biting off more than you can chew. Do not feel like you have to have all this external equipment and fancy cameras and software to go live. You can really keep it simple for the first one and then grow from there. Gilad, do you have any quick tips? I know you kind of touched on it already, but anything to add on this common mistake?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we mentioned before, we often get folks and talk to people, creators that have a really big idea, and those ideas are fantastic, and I encourage everybody to shoot for that. But it's also easy to just take baby steps to get there and learn upon your first broadcast, right? And as you upgrade, there's always going to be more that you can do, right? Always. So just,
and I would say,
take it slow. Yeah.
Take it slow and focus on the content.
But
the reason you're going,
that's right. The
content.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason you're going online in the first place is that you have something valuable to share, and that's what your audience is going to come for. And that's what they're going to show up for again. And, there was a lot of questions in the pre-submitted form about how do I keep my audience engaged? And the best way to keep your audience engaged is obviously don't have a ton of technical difficulties that are interrupting the experience, but just focus on the content and what you're delivering. And then we're going to dive into, yeah, 100%. Common mistake number 2, not testing enough. This was something that we covered earlier in the deck, but I want to double click on something that Gilad said when we were talking about the streaming and how he and I went online, which is a run of show. So if anyone here is from the live performance or theater world, you know about rehearsals. You would never go on stage without testing your mic first. And it's the same thing with virtual events. So Galad, anything to add from, we've covered a little bit of this already, but anything else you'd add to this, common problem?
Well, not testing enough. You said it before. I say it every time I talk. We talk, and I think that's the number one thing I hope you take away here is just test, and try whatever it is you're thinking of doing, and you'll learn so much from just doing such, and you'll learn where you may need some help, right? Or maybe you need to upgrade, and so that's really the main takeaway for me. I mean, I think a run of show, having an understanding of what is your flow, right? As you see, we're running over here. There's so many great questions, right? So understanding kind of that flow, understanding where everything is going to hit by way of clocks, and what do you do if it runs over, right? Do you cut certain elements? Do you elongate it, right? But understanding that you have that framework is really smart.
Yeah.
To just put some boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to have a little idea of what you're doing, keep it dynamic to keep people engaged. And then I think that feeds nicely into the next one, which is you can have the best event in the whole world on the internet, and you won't, if you don't think about where it's going and how you're getting it to your audience and how you're finding your audience, you won't have anyone dial in, which is, just a bummer. So one of the most
Right.
common mistakes that Galad and I have both seen on the Eventbrite and streaming side is that people need to consider their distribution and marketing and treat them as, separate things and figure out how you're going to get it to people. So do you want to talk a little bit about like what distribution means?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's the distribution and also the destination or the channels, right? Distribution is essentially how you're getting the signal to these locations. But the connections or the channels that we talk about are where are people going to watch your broadcast? And we talked a little bit about this, where there's many different locations, and you can use some platforms like Restream to send it to all of them at once. Knowing where your audience is always helpful. Sometimes you may not know, so when you're starting off, it may be good to send it to a couple different destinations and understand where is that audience really living, and maybe you focus more on there. As you continue to grow, right, you can add other channels when you have more people on your team or more resources to figure out how to increase engagement or watching, on those other channels. But really, to start off, I always advise sending it to multiple locations if you're able to, right? If it's not preventing the event from reaching its goal.
Yeah, 100%. And then the things that I would add to that are using platforms like Eventbrite help you to add additional touch points before the event to help people get engaged, send follow-up emails to re-engage them afterwards. And then also, think about marketing. So one of the things that we offer is this really amazing integration with a company like ToneDen that supports you in creating a marketing plan. This could be a whole nother webinar, and maybe we should do it.
It really can.
But I will say you can go to the Eventbrite blog. We have a ton of great tips on distribution and marketing ideas and some information there. This next tip, I think, is another really juicy one that I'm seeing a lot of comments pop in. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone on the channel. There's a few of you who are clearly experts and you're sharing your knowledge, and it's so awesome for me to see. So thank you for talking to each other. And this kind of goes to common mistake number 4 is taking on a really complicated live stream without backup. You don't have to do this alone. Even if you're just doing your very first live stream and it's a Zoom call, one super easy tip that I recommend to brand new creators online is to get someone in that Zoom call with you as a co-host. Oops. And turn off your notifications so you don't get phone calls in the middle of the webinar. But you really want to have someone there to support you, to help with any technical difficulties, to maybe help monitor the Q&A, and also just be there as a support system. And that's like the basic, don't do this alone, but then it scales up from there. So Galad, what are some other ways to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with a team so that you are able to focus on the audience during the call itself.
Absolutely. There's a few different for the definition of kind of a backup. There's a few things I think about, right? Think about backup earpods, backup computer, if possible, right? Backup internet connection. If the event is very important, these things are areas that you should consider. But additionally, there's teams, there's people near you, there's other companies out there, including ourselves, that would be happy to help you identify or work with you throughout the process to bring your event to life, right? And I think you don't have to go out of this alone, right? And it could be just a friend that's your moderator, or it can be somebody, it's a colleague, or it could be, bringing on a team that can, like a production team, right? That can do the event, but also oftentimes these production teams have people that can bring on to be a moderator or to be a talent, kind of coordinator, if you will. So, you can always ask, and most times people are very happy to help.
Yeah, I love that. And I think about the fact that when we're doing in-person events, you don't do those alone. It's not really a solo project. There's a venue, there's a
Right.
stage, there's co-presenters, and it takes a lot of the joy out of it if you're just trying to figure it out on your own. So one of the most fun parts of doing webinars like this for me is getting to learn from the co-presenters and getting to do these dry runs and get that sort of excitement of creating live experiences, which is, the reason a lot of us are here and doing what we do. And then, the only other thing that I would add here is that you can also get help in terms of like graphics. So a lot of people asked about, how do I make
Oh
my
yeah.
presentation look better? How do I make it more interesting? If you have a designer, they can look into things, stream over and what Galad is saying, lowers in some of these animafics, but there's also some companies out there that have some pre-built-in ways. Canva is one of them. They have some great options for creating overlays and introduction slides. There's actually a brand new company called which I love the name. It's like literally just
Yeah.
MHMM, and they have this really advanced way to create like cool presentations, really interesting backdrop. So there's a ton of tools
Their
out there,
product is so
especially
cool.
over the course of 20. Isn't it fun? Yeah, I just found out about it a couple of
Yeah,
months ago, and I was really excited about it.
yeah, I've been playing with it too. It's very neat, and it's so easy to use, and it really looks very professional. But
Yeah.
additionally, things like OBS or Restream or StreamYard, they often have things, elements that you don't even need a designer, right? You type in the person's name, and they'll show up with whatever color you want, right, in the right place. So, there's, like we're saying, right, you can leverage other folks to help, right? But you can also just get started and poking around with some of these tools out there, and see if that works for you, right? These solutions that we stated, some have limitations, some can meet your expectations, right? So it really depends on what your goals are and how you choose to move forward, right? And how you progress and then evolve and upgrade over time.
Yeah. And learning from each other, I, as the founder of the Eventbrite community programs, I am so passionate about the fact that we can learn so much if we just talk to other event creators, whether they're doing events that are similar to ours or completely different things. There's just this wealth of knowledge, which my heart is just exploding seeing it happening in the comments here today. So finding more opportunities to connect with other event creators and see how they do things I think takes this
Absolutely.
pressure off of all of us to figure it out by ourselves. Quick plug
No,
for
what?
the blog. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing that often,
Yeah.
gets overlooked as well is you don't have to do it live, right? You can record your content
Mm-hmm.
or some element
True.
of it, and then you can put those together and broadcast that out, right? And focus your attention on the chat room and engagement, right? So it doesn't always have to be live. We do love live. We do both, but it's also an option.
Yeah, 100%.
So
And I
please
actually
open it
was
up. Yeah.
Yeah, my quick example of that is I've been dialing into a lot of event industry conferences to see kind of how people are talking about the future of events and understand, how people are navigating this crazy time. And I was sort of surprised to find out how much pre-recorded content people were using. But the cool thing about pre-recorded content is if you're using pre-recorded content and live streaming it, you can actually be present and engaged with your attendees in the chat area. So finding a platform that allows you to engage via chat, I think, is a must-have these days. If we can't talk to each other in person in the audience, we need some way to communicate and feel engaged. So definitely look into that as an option. And platforms as simple as Zoom, you can encourage people to utilize the Q&A section and the chat section in Zoom to ask questions and talk to each other. And that's the thing I think a lot of us are missing is staring at a screen and getting talked at is a thing that happens to us all day. And so we really want to feel like we can participate and engage. I know that's how I feel as an attendee. Oh my gosh, we have done a fantastic job of talking a lot, and we have like 4 minutes left. I want to be really respectful of
Oh
everyone's
man,
time. I appreciate so many of you have stuck with us this whole time, and I'm so excited about that. We had a couple of really like the questions that showed up again and again when I was looking through the form. So I do want to get to those for the
yeah.
folks that took the time to submit these. And the one that I want to start with, because we've covered a lot of them actually, is what do you do when things go wrong? You're doing a live stream,
Hmm.
your internet cuts out, your audio cuts out, you lost a slide. What are some of the tips and tricks for how to navigate what is a live event in a new virtual environment?
Oh, I love this question, and mainly because in live things always go wrong, right? I mean, even
Always.
earlier you had an issue going to the next slide, right? And that could be very stressful. What we like to do is have contingency plans. And as we said earlier from testing, it reduces the stress. It really allows you to get comfortable with what you're about to put on. And having a contingency plan, and that's what we call, is basically a backup plan to what happens if the you know, uh, moment happens. Um, and thinking about these really just allows you to, if nothing more, know what you're going to do or what you can expect, right? Having a backup maybe not always doable, but knowing that it can go wrong, the internet can cut out, the power can cut out right now, right? I mean, what do you do then, right? And so having contingency plans is key. And if, let's say, the power cut out right now and it was the end of the stream, we'll have folks commenting in the chat room and notifying our audience, right? But really thinking about it and what can go wrong, right? And so internet, video, audio can cut out, the slides can cut out, the guest may not show up, right? What do you do then? So thinking about how does the show go on is very important, in my opinion, so that you can keep the calm. And when those things do occur, hopefully they don't, but if they do, you know where you're going to go. And the team knows as well. You're not figuring it out as it happens, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
very important.
100%. And, someone else mentioned in the comments that the audiences are really forgiving. So this is kind of another one of those, don't be too afraid, don't get spun up in your head about all the layers. Just try
Right.
it simply, and know that a lot of us are navigating tech issues. And so I always, when I'm doing more complicated calls, like to tell people, like, bear with us if we have any technical difficulties, because people usually ride that wave with you, and you can even be authentic and let them know what you're going through, especially if it's an event creator
That's
call.
right.
Um, and oh my gosh,
And
so we're getting some great questions here, and I want people to know, I want to rest assured, some people have to duck out. They've mentioned that it's time for them to leave. We are going to send a follow-up email. We'll include as many of the resources as possible, as well as try to grab some of these frequently asked questions. I know our amazing content team has been keeping track of some of them. So we'll include a couple of those in the follow-up email, as well as some ways to get in touch with the Eventbrite team if you have questions, and Galad and his Elevated Stream team if you want to look into what it looks like to get a kit or get some consulting or support on one of your live stream events. I'm gonna close there so that everyone can go about their busy lives and take a break from the screen for a moment. But Gilad, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
for
you.
sharing all of your wisdom and insight. And to all of the audience members, thank you so much. Go ahead and, if
Thank you,
you feel like
everybody.
it, subscribe to the Eventbrite YouTube. We host webinars pretty frequently, and so you can always dial in and look out for that follow-up email so that you can engage with us afterwards. All right. I think with that note, we are all going to close our eyes for a minute and get away from the screen, and we will all see you somewhere else on the internet.
Bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much, everybody.